Hey, Dad, how did they make tools before they had tools to make tools with? Son, I'll get back to you on that. Hi, I'm Woody Huffines. I'm the Nerds to Go in McKinney, Texas, and this is Tech for the Untechnical. If you're a parent, every now and then your kids ask you questions that at first blush seem pretty simple, but then you get into the explanation of why it is that you had to have tools that weren't really tools to move up the tool chain. And the answer to a question gets pretty hard sometimes, and it feels like a simple question going in. And one of the ones that we deal with at Nerds to Go very frequently is, why is my internet slow? And that's not an easy thing to answer any more than it's easy to answer how you make tools without tools. The first thing that happens frequently for our customers is that they confuse the internet speed with the network speed of the resource they're connecting to. For example, we had a client a couple of weeks ago that was having a slow internet. And why is my internet so slow? And so when we went over there to look, his internet was running fine. The problem was the website he was connecting to was really slow. So if the website won't give you the data, it doesn't matter how fast your network is. The network having a really fast speed can only give you the speed of the internet latency or the server latency online. So the first thing that you need to ask yourself when you're having a slow internet is your internet slow, or is the resource that you're connecting to slow? The second thing that has to do with why your internet might be slow is what I call network choke points. The only way to tell really how much speed you're getting on the internet is to hook a computer directly up to your router, be it your laptop or your desktop, so that you can see exactly how much speed the internet service provider is providing at the router. As soon as you move away from the router and you're looking through, checking your internet speed through wireless, or checking your internet speed because you're connected to a switch that's connected to the router, or anything else, you don't know really what your speed is. You know what the speed is wirelessly, or you know what the speed is through a switch. There's a bunch of different things that can cause a choke point in your network that makes it look like your internet's slow when your internet's plenty fast. To give you an example, we had a client recently that had faster internet installed and none of the computers were running any faster. And they kept calling the internet service provider and saying our internet's still slow. The internet service provider kept saying, no, you're getting everything we told you. You're getting 800 megabits a second. And it's like, well, I'm not getting anything more than 100 megabits on any of the machines on the network. So we go over there and find out that the switch they were running through to connect all their computers was what's called a 10-100 switch. So the maximum speed of that switch was 100 megabits. So it didn't matter that you get 600 or 800 megabits from the ISP. You might have a piece of equipment in your network that's causing a choke point and slowing that internet speed down. Another example is a firewall. We use a Unify Security Gateway, for example, in our shop, and I use it for some of its firewall functionality. Deep packet inspection, threat management. It looks for things as the stuff comes into the store to make sure that somebody's not going to steal credit card data or customer data or whatever else. Well, by virtue of the fact that I'm using that appliance to do deep packet inspection and to do threat management, anything that comes over that wire, that piece of equipment has to go check to make sure that it's not from a bad website, or make sure that it's not from a company that's got a bad reputation, and make sure that it doesn't have malware. And so the time that it takes to do that and the speed with which it does that slows my network down. So my network at any one of the endpoints in the network is a lot slower than my network would be if I wasn't using that functionality. And a lot of routers that some of the ISPs use have that, and people turn it on. They want a firewall kind of thing, or they want threat management, or they want antivirus on the router. Well, that takes up resources, and those resources may be slowing your internet down from what the ISP is providing, and there might be a better answer, and we can help you with that. But that's another example of a network choke point. And finally, a common network choke point is a VPN, or a virtual private network, especially when people are working from home. We've talked a little bit about VPN, and maybe I can give you a link of a video here. But what a VPN does is it encrypts all of the traffic between two computers, so that you're sitting at home and you're connecting to your computer at work, and that VPN gets established, and it and it encrypts all of the data that goes into that connection, and then it decrypts it on the other end. And that encryption and decryption stuff that's happening on either end tends to slow the connection down. So if you're connected by VPN, your network's going to look slower. Now, the network may be running fine, but there's a choke point in the communication that makes it look slower. And finally, Wi-Fi is often at fault for a slow connection. And I use the term quotes in slow connection because the connection may be fine and it's the Wi-Fi that's the issue. So why is Wi-Fi an issue with internet speed? Well, the first thing that happens with Wi-Fi is people look at the Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi vendors talk about the theoretical maximum for the different standards, 802AX or 802BC or 802G or whatever the standard is that your modem and router, your internet, your wireless router says. It say, hey, you ought to be able to get 1.2 gigabytes with this 802AX Wi-Fi 6 modem router combination. Well, that's a theoretical maximum. Those theoretical maximums don't work in the real world. I used to have a physics professor that says, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there's an enormous difference between theory and practice. So that theoretical maximum is what the standard says you could get, but that means that you would have to have that piece of equipment that's connecting to the wireless network 1.5 feet away from the wireless network access point, and everything running perfectly on your network interface card, and etc., for you to get that maximum throughput. That throughput doesn't happen in the real world. One of the best access points, and it's one that we've used in a lot of different scenarios, especially large installations, is a Unify AC Pro access point. That AC Pro, that access point, is a great access point. But regularly on a network situation, it's not going to move more than about 200 megabits per second. Now, for a home environment, most business environments, that's plenty. But if you do a speed test and you go, hey, what's going on here? I've only got 200 megabits per second. That is the difference between the theoretical maximum of a wireless network and the actual maximum that the machine is able to deliver in the real world. So why is that real world number different than the theoretical maximum? Well, it has a lot to do with your house. How many walls are there between where your wireless router is and where you're trying to connect? Because every wall is going to attenuate or reduce that signal. Do you have metal studs in your house? Do you have a bunch of ceiling fans that are on? There's all this stuff that's going on that reduces the amount of throughput that wireless network can have, especially from a single access point. Now, the other piece of that we find that's especially true these days is the number of devices that's connected to that access point or connected to that wireless network. If you think of it like your shower, think of it as the water that comes into your house. You have a pipe coming into your house and it delivers 100 gallons an hour, and that's what it can deliver is 100 gallons an hour. If you have every faucet in the house on, there's not nearly as much water coming out of any one faucet because that 100 gallons per hour is being divided up by a number of faucets. Heck, we all know that. If you're in the shower and somebody flushes the stool in the bathroom that you're in, that you get a surge and maybe you get burned because the cold water goes to the stool flush instead of the shower. The same thing's true of the internet. If you have a whole bunch of wireless devices hooked up to your wireless network, each one of those devices is sharing the total amount of throughput for the network that's actually getting onto the wireless network. So if you think about the wireless network itself, if you got, and I've talked about this before, on my wireless network I probably have 30 devices connected through the house. Well, if I'm going to get 300 megabits per second total, and my wireless network was going to use all 300 of that 300 megabits per second with 30 different access points, the best I could expect if every one of them was running full tilt would be 10 megs a second. Now, there's a lot of load balancing that the router does to make sure that if something's not being used, it doesn't deliver 10 megabits per second to a device that's not using 10 meg. If I got a television off, that television's not drawing part of what the throughput is, but if you have a whole lot of devices, especially security cameras, Ring doorbells, things that are on and off the network that are moving high quality video over the network, that may slow your network down. So for example, if your wireless access point or your internet router, the router that you got from your ISP, is on one side of your house and you're trying to connect your laptop on the complete other side of the house, that signal's got to go through a bunch of walls and it's going to get attenuated, and the connection speed that you have that long distance away is going to be significantly slower because wireless works like any other radio wave. The further you are from the radio station, the weaker the signal is. And it's even a little more complex with wireless because you're translating back and forth. So the speed and power of the radio that's in your computer and the speed and power of the radio that's in the wireless router, those things have to be working well together to maximize the amount of speed that you get. And the further away you get, the slower the speed's going to be. Now, the next thing that people try is a mesh network. And there's some great mesh networks out there, don't get me wrong. We've got a customer that's got an Orbi network, and he's got a 4, 5, 6,000 square foot house, and he's getting 400 megabit per second tests a bunch of places in the house because that Orbi network is really good at being a mesh network. But with a mesh network, what happens in a mesh network is you have the base station, and the base station communicates with the various mesh points. And although it's really handy because you only have one internet SSID or network ID that you're going through to the house, if you're in the kitchen, you connect to the same thing that you connect to outside by the pool. The problem is, with a mesh network, part of the mesh network's throughput is management of the network. In other words, if you have the base station and a mesh point and another mesh point past that, the base station has to communicate through the intermediate mesh point to reach the furthest mesh point to understand what's going on with the network. So part of the throughput of the network is going to network management to manage the network. This gets complex pretty quick. Anyway, here's the point. How fast is my internet? How slow is my internet? Why is my internet slow? That's always a question that's going to be a little more complex than it looks up front. The biggest thing that you need to be aware of is if everything's working fine in the house, it really doesn't matter how fast your internet is. For example, my internet speed is 300 megabits per second in the house. I've got 30 things on my wireless devices. I've got a couple of 3 computers connected. I've got a whole bunch of stuff connected. Now, I have friends that go, well, I've got gigabit Ethernet. That's great. You want to pay $150, $200 a month to get gigabit, that's awesome. But if I'm not experiencing any slowdowns and I can stream Netflix and I can listen to streaming music by the pool, do I care that I have gigabit Ethernets? For me, that's kind of like having a Ferrari that you're driving up and down the tollway. You can only go 70 miles an hour. It doesn't matter that the Ferrari can go 200. You can only use 70 miles an hour of it. And that's the same thing that's true with your network. So if you're having trouble, if there's a specific problem, like you can't have a Zoom call in some part of your house because the network drops the call, or you're having a specific problem in that the television show you're watching keeps buffering and it's irritating, absolutely, we need to figure out what that problem is. You need to go through testing what your actual speed is, looking for network choke points, and then looking at seeing how your Wi-Fi is behaving. If you're not having any problems, it really doesn't matter. And we've got some people that walk around their house doing the internet speed test, and it's like, hey, I'm only getting 50 megabits per second in the kitchen. Okay, what's the problem? I'm only getting 50 megabits per second in the kitchen. So, is your Amazon Alexa working? Yeah. Is the television in here connecting to your Hulu? Yeah. Then why do you care if you're only getting 50 megabits per second? If you don't have a problem, don't borrow one. If you do have a problem and you want some technical advice on how to fix it, give us a call. I'm Woody Huffines on the Nerds to Go in McKinney, Texas. If you find this information helpful, hit the subscribe button, mash the like, hit the notification bell, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and we'll talk again soon.